Hello, friends and VEDSies. I know I said I was going to do my responses to everybody today, my sort of reflections on VEDS, but I had an idea and I'm running out of time and I don't want to let it go. And tomorrow is the last day. We can do all the reflections on the last day. So instead, I am going to do something that is partially a response to videos that have taken place earlier in VEDS. So I'm not directly responding to either of these things, but it's an idea that was born from both of them. So one, I challenged everybody to take a character that they like and put them in a different story, and your responses be wildin'. I absolutely loved them. And the other thing is that Graham challenged those of you who know to make a video about D&D to help to explain to those of us who don't know what the heck is up with D&D. Now, I've never played D&D, but I was once the GM for a Carly Rae Jepsen themed cyberpunk heist one-shot RPG called Boy Problems, and it was incredibly fun. And I know that there's a lot of sort of one-shot tabletop RPGs out there. Like, there's a lot of rule sets that you could use to quickly put together a game if you weren't interested in putting together a whole campaign. So I thought if we as VEDSies ever wanted to get together and to do some kind of D&D thing, maybe we'd want it to be an ongoing thing, or maybe we'd want to just try it and get started with a sort of one-off game. The fun thing about Boy Problems is that it had you come up with a rule set that was really simple, really flexible. You basically picked a character, gave them just a couple stats, and then the system for making decisions was really, really straightforward. All you needed was your standard 6-sided die. It's super easy to just grab and go. And because I cannot stop thinking about it for one heckin' second, I started thinking about which classic Doctor Who settings would make for really entertaining one-off RPGs. Okay, so setting 1 is from the Second Doctor's era, and it is the Land of Fiction from The Mind Robber. The Land of Fiction is a pocket universe inhabited by characters from fiction, mythology, and folklore. It was created by the gods of Ragnarok and is ruled over by the Master of the Land. So there's a lot of fun to be had here in a metafictional way, because like your DM would occupy a very similar space as the Master of the Land of Stories in terms of being able to manipulate things and create characters, and we would have the entire sort of literary and folklore and mythology canon to draw from when it comes to creating NPCs. It would be a little bit surrealist. It would be fantasy. It could have adventure. You could have some really weird mishaps. One of the fun things that happens in the episode is that the Doctor has to rearrange Jamie's face, and he rearranges it wrong, and we end up with like fake Jamie for an episode. Anyways, I just think there's like lots of really interesting stuff to dig into here, especially because I know how many VEDSies are so interested in storytelling. And so then I think like ending up in a land of stories and really starting to question like player agency and like our role in different stories and how much agency you have in a world where everything's being created by a writer. Like a writer writes something and it just happens in the world, and who has control of that, and like a battle for control over that. I just think it would be fascinating. Second setting is from the Third Doctor's era, and it would be the Miniscope from Carnival of Monsters. So the Miniscope was like a sideshow attraction that contained miniaturized versions of various creatures, all in their own sections. So the Miniscope had a bunch of different micro environments, and the Doctor and Jo found themselves in one that contained like a 1920s cargo ship. It also had Ogrons and Cybermen and a Plesiosaurus and all manner of creatures. So what I like about the Miniscope is we have lots of opportunities for like fantasy monsters and creatures. You could have lots of different settings. You could keep the settings that you had in this episode of the show, or we could sort of determine our own zones of the Miniscope, and you could sort of pick from different eras in history or different sci-fi or fantasy settings that you wanted to incorporate. And then the idea of the Miniscope is that it's this piece of technology that like you get miniaturized and trapped in. So like the quest of this one shot could be about like finding your way to the control center of the Miniscope so that you can escape it and like become large again and confront the owners of the Miniscope. I think there's a lot of good potential for drama in there. Okay, and our last setting is from the Fourth Doctor's era, and it would be the planet from the Face of Evil. So the planet is never given a name, but we know that it is home to these two tribes, the Sevatim, who are warriors of the jungle, and the Tesh, who are brilliant with technology. And their god, Xoanin, turns out to be a supercomputer with an identity crisis. So I love the plurality of settings here. We've got the sort of dangerous jungle and the village of the Sevatim tribe, and then we've also got this rocket, like this spaceship interior, where there's this mad supercomputer who is trying to resolve its own identity. And we've got two very distinct classes of people in the Sevatim and the Tesh, very different kinds of characters, and they would offer lots of interesting opportunities for NPCs. And additionally, the planet has this pretty interesting backstory about like a rocket that crashed and how the survivors of that crash became the descendants of the planet and how they divided into these two factions. Like there's a real rich history that you could draw upon. And for me, one of the things that I really like about world building is when you can not only have a quest that's exciting in the moment and you're doing all of your adventuring, but you're also like learning things about the history and culture of this world, and that starts to inform the ways that you make decisions and hopefully would inform your quest. And in this story, the whole conceit of the Face of Evil is that like they look to the mountainside and the face that's carved into the side of the mountain is the Doctor's face, and he is the evil one. And he's like, okay, what did I do? When was I here last? When did I become the evil one? I don't think that I'm evil. And I just think, ooh, wouldn't that be so juicy if you've like put together this party and they're like going and they're exploring the jungle and they meet this tribe and they're trying to convince them that they're not a threat. And then they like look at the mountain and it's one of their faces up on the mountain. Undoubtedly, one of the best things about the classic series is all of the people and planets that the writers introduce us to. Now, the budget couldn't always live up to their vision, but I think that there's so many interesting concepts at work in every season of the show, which would make it the perfect ground for just a one-shot RPG or even a campaign. Anyway, my fellow VEDSies, that's it for me tonight. I want to say thank you to those of you who tried to explain to me and Graham what is up with D&D. We do appreciate it. I will see all of you tomorrow for my reflections on the very last day of VEDS. Until then, friends, good night.